afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm Tabitha Robinson. I'm the president of WPC. Before we get started today, just a few housekeeping matters. Since we are here all together, just please stay on mute during the session so we can focus on what the presenters are saying today. And before we also get started, I have just a couple of announcements. So WPC has some great programming coming up later this month and throughout the year. So our next program is a virtual book review and cocktail hour with author Alice Randall. She will be discussing her new book, My Black Country, and it will be moderated by none other than Sarah Lee Woods. And that will be on Thursday, January 24th at 6 p.m. over Zoom. So you don't want to miss out on that. And I think there's also a 10% off discount at Parnassus if you include that you will be buying the book for this book club. So don't miss out on that either. You can register at WPCTN.com. And another exciting announcement we have is we've got an application due in a couple days for the WPC Community and Political Leadership Program. So I believe applications are due this Wednesday. So please share the word with anyone that you might know that might be interested. And if you're interested, go ahead and apply. It takes about 2 minutes. So this is an inaugural program. It's going to be over the course of a year, and it's designed to empower individuals with skills and knowledge needed to drive change in their communities by enhancing community awareness and political literacy through a series of mostly virtual sessions. Again, it takes about 2 minutes to apply. So if you're at least interested in learning more, go ahead and apply. Next, I'm going to introduce one of our panelists, Kristen Minke, and she will take it from there. So Kristen serves as Special Master for the 4th Circuit Court for Davidson County, Tennessee. She has served in this capacity since her appointment in April 2023. She received her undergraduate degree from UT in 1999 and her law degree from Memphis in 2005. After graduating from law school, Kristen clerked for Judge Thomas T. Woodle in the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. In 2007, she was hired by DA General Victor S. Johnson for the 20th Judicial Circuit and served as an assistant DA prosecuting crime against children until entering private practice in 2014. The bulk of Kristen's private practice consists of family law and some criminal defense. And in her capacity as Special Master for the 4th Circuit Court and under the supervision of Judge Stephanie Williams, Kristen reviews, processes, and prepares all termination of parental rights matters that are filed in Davidson County Circuit Court and all adoption matters adjudicated in Davidson County. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Kristen.
Thank you very much. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm happy to be here and happy to be moderating. I'm excited about the topic, and I want to just briefly have our speakers give a description in a minute or two, maybe less than two, about yourselves and your involvement with adoption law so that our participants have a good understanding of who you are and what you do and what your background is, if you would, please. And Dawn, if you'd like to start.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dawn Kopic. I write Kopic on Tennessee adoption law. It is in its 8th edition that came out last year. I operate Good Law, a seminar company that produces primarily adoption law and ethics seminars. And I have practiced adoption law since 1987 in basically all counties east of Nashville. So you won't see me much in Davidson County, but in the east counties, I'm running the roads over here, and I love what I do.
Thank you. Judge Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. I first want to say thank you to Tabitha and Joyce McDaniel and the Women's Political Collaborative for hosting this forum. I'm excited to have it and to be a part of it today because there are a lot of things in adoption law that I think we should bring to the attention of those that practice in adoption. And so I'm excited to be able to join Dawn and Courtney here today to discuss some of those things along with Special Master Minke. My name is Stephanie Williams, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure as serving as the judge of the Fourth Circuit Court here in Davidson County. I have been serving as judge here since September 1st of 2024 and had the honor and pleasure to be the special master of the Fourth Circuit Court from January of 2014 until April of 2023. So Fourth Circuit Court is the only court in Davidson County that handles adoption cases. So my experience primarily from adoption law and termination of parental rights stems from my work in the Fourth Circuit Court. I've been practicing law over 20 years, but in my private practice, I did not do much with adoption law. I did some dependency and neglect cases, but not termination or adoption. So, so my work is more from in the court perspective, but I'm excited to be here. I'm gonna put myself on mute because my phone never rings. And for some reason it's rung twice since we've been on this.
Mine's ringing too. I'm sorry if I can hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. And Courtney?
Hi.
I can't see her on my screen.
I'm at the top. I'm on the top of my Zoom.
Oh, okay. There you are. Hi. Good morning.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really honored to be a part of this panel and slightly terrified that some of you might be getting some CLE from me because as a lobbyist, our opinions are not valuable sometimes. Just kidding. My name's Courtney Atnip. I am the founding partner here at Capital and Fifth Public Strategies. I've been lobbying. Today marks my 21st legislative session. I started out as a disability back in the day. Yeah, a little motorcycle. I worked at the Tennessee Disability Coalition from 2005 to 2013. I cut my teeth on doing not-for-profit advocacy at the legislature. In 2013, I joined a law firm. And then in 2017, my business partners and I started Capital and Fifth Public Strategies. We represent a lot of not-for-profit organizations. It's kind of one of our bedrock clients. We do stuff ranging from municipal lobbying for the city of Memphis to a lot of associations for provider groups, funeral home directors, et cetera. And we have a team of 6. So I'm lucky to work with some of the best folks in the business. But the other thing that brings me to this panel, besides my experience with lobbying, is I'm an adoptive parent. My daughter is 16 and a half, which is crazy to believe. Joyce, if I could see your face, you'd probably be in shock when I say that. For some of you all on this call, I've worked in concert with, and we've had some tough moments working on some legislation, but I really enjoy working on adoption law at the legislature. And I took my experience. We did a domestic adoption here. She was born in Arkansas, and my experience from that, and used it on some bills at the legislature. So my expertise today is really from a personal perspective, but also what I understand about the legislature. And I'm just honored to be a part of this esteemed panel.
Thank you very much. I sort of thought that might be a good place to start. Courtney, if you're comfortable with it, with what some of the recent changes in the adoption law have been, or things that you know to be coming down the pike. And I wanted to also say quickly to everyone, if you have a question that you would like to ask, I'm doing my best to monitor this chat, and I will try to get to them as they pop up. And if I don't, we'll leave a little bit of time at the end of the session for any questions that people have. So with that being said.
Well, I'm embarrassed to tell you I don't know all the upcoming adoption issues, Kristen, and I apologize for not being more prepared for everyone. So other folks might know it better than I do. There was Jeremy Harrell has started an organization, and I can't remember the name of it, that deals on adoption stuff. And I'm sure Dawn and others have probably have met with him. Back in the day, when we first started looking at adoption law, it was just a gaggle of us that were adoptive parents that were lobbying and had some common interest in the process, whether that dealing with the time frame of the revocation period, or that dealt with the process of the termination. And so, and I know that I have been a little bit out of the loop, and forgive me, because Jeremy's group kind of took the ball and ran with it on a couple things. And again, Dawn or Lisa Collins, if she's on here, she might know more than I do. But I think that the legislature is lucky in that there are several legislators who are adoptive parents. Chairman Faison, for example, adopted his son from the foster care program and is very passionate about various issues dealing with adoption. Senator Hale's child is also adopted, and he's very passionate about those issues. And so one of the things that I think is, I'll say this briefly, and then hopefully some folks that might know more than I do can chime in. One of the things that I think is interesting about adoption is that, especially in the political space, is that it's nonpartisan, really. You have Democrats and Republicans that both have shared life experience with that. And so it's interesting to hear everybody kind of sit around and tell their story of what led them to adopting and then their process of adoption with their child. And that's one of the things I've really enjoyed with working on those issues is the nonpartisan perspective of it. And, a lot of the deep respect that each of us have for our experiences.
Thank you for that. And you were certainly not expected to come with every legislative.
I've got 50 clients on my brain right now on bills I got to file this week. So I'm a little.
I understand. We appreciate you being here in the capacity you are and being an adopted parent. So,
Thank you.
but your comment about things being nonpartisan is actually a good segue to something I wanted to have, or we all hope to have Dawn talk about, and that is that although it is a nonpartisan topic, there are certainly people involved. There are players, or everyone is filling a role during an adoption, and they have their own agenda. And that is true in both a termination of parental rights case and in an adoption case. And Dawn, I thought maybe you could start us off by talking about that, or start your session by talking about what those individual roles are and how those perspectives differ, and how we can do our best to balance all of that with the best interest of the children.
Sure. And I want to echo what Courtney said about it normally being a really nonpartisan thing. There's also an adoption coalition at the federal level in the U.S. Congress that is nonpartisan and does some really good work. So that's all really good. She mentioned Lisa Collins. Lisa Collins is on the call if she wants to talk about a little bit. She worked legislation for the adoption attorneys at the TBA last year, and Jennifer Williams, I think the year before that, is also on the call. Both are active and stellar members of the Davidson County Area Adoption Bar, Middle Tennessee Adoption Practitioners. Okay, points of view. I think one of the good things to do is to start out thinking about the adoption triad, which is the word that the social work kind of people and the policy people use to talk about the three different poles of interested people in an adoption: the birth parent, the child, and the adopted parent. And one of the reasons our laws are so nuanced is that we're trying to take everybody's rights into account. And then to complicate things a little bit more, all of those people will evolve over time because, the adoption process takes place over a matter of weeks or months typically, but the role of being an adopted person or a adopted parent or a birth parent is a lifelong thing. And so when you engage with people at different points of the process, they tend to want and value different things. So the triad makes everything a little bit complicated. And then we end up, particularly as of late, with, we've always had a lot of sociology, psychology, medicine that all inform what we do. And now we have a lot of politics. And so I represent people with a variety of political views. And I've written now post-adoption contact agreements that include terms about whether or not the child will be vaccinated. We're really engaging in some odd stuff. from the party standpoint, keeping everybody's interest in mind is an issue. One of the other things I know, I think we're going to talk about is how do the lawyers' different issues affect how they engage in the process, and that's pretty nuanced too. And that's where I think we run into some pretty serious ethical problems sometimes. Kristen, if there's something more specific you want, or Judge Williams, you want me to say about that right now, you let me know and I'll launch right in. Y'all know I have a lot to say about that.
I appreciate that. No, one of the things that was very compelling to me, Dawn, when I went to one of your seminars, is you were very forthcoming about suggesting exactly what those motivations might be from the different parties that are playing the game. And so when we talk about, for example, a child that's in the care of Department of Children's Services, what are their goals? And I remember you really saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you're like, their goal is to not have children in foster care
Right.
for any longer than they need to be there, and for them to get placed into permanent homes. And then you talked about, the adoptive parents and what their goals and motivations are. So that really hit home with me in a different way, to understand that when I'm hearing these cases and I'm kind of evaluating things, really understanding the perspective from which the different parties are presenting their cases based on what their outcomes, need to be and why. So if you want to elaborate on that a little bit more,
Sure.
that would be great.
Sure. I think the filters to look at these through are money and emotion. The department, for example, that's in many of these cases, the state, I know we've got some people who are not lawyers. The department is the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, and it is our child welfare agency in Tennessee. And they're the ones that take custody of dependent and neglected children and place them with foster parents who ultimately often adopt them. And they want to keep within their budget. And their mandate is to attend to the needs of children. But they define the scope of that pretty narrowly, and they track very closely how quick these kids are moving through custody. And it's often cheaper for them to return the child to a possibly questionable safety situation than it is to run through the whole rubric of working a foster care plan with the birth parent and rehabilitate them and reunify them, or place the child for adoption, pay adoption assistance, which is a cost that is largely federal funds, but some state funds too, until the child is grown. So there's a lot of economic incentive behind a lot of different decisions in a DCS case. There are economic decisions for the lawyers. For example, lawyers get $1,500 to finalize an adoption for the Department of Children's Services. That's considerably less than lawyers make in a private case, but you'll see lawyers who might be guardian ad litems that don't, a guardian ad litem is a lawyer for the child, typically in juvenile court, but also in termination cases, who might want to get that case, they've maxed out what they can get as a guardian ad litem, but if there's a termination, then they can get the adoption fee, or a birth parent's lawyer might contest a termination and then encourage their client to appeal, because then they can refresh their fee. So some of these decisions come from when can the lawyer refresh their fee? You might have a lawyer that panders to the department, even though they represent adopting foster parents, schedules things on the social worker's time frame, doesn't question questionable termination of parental rights before an adoption takes place, doesn't encourage their clients to advocate for more medical history, for example, because that will all rock the boat with the department. The department will discourage foster parents from hiring this particular lawyer. So there's a lot of money stuff. I'll talk to new lawyers sometimes who will be so excited because some shady out-of-state agency calls them for all of their Tennessee adoptions. And I'm thinking, you must be a pushover. Where are your ethics? Because occasionally you have to say, no, Tennessee says birth parents get counseling. If they want it, they get it. Or you need to really offer them a lawyer, or I'm not going to lie to them about what your state offers that we don't, that they might have available. So, I mean, I'll just say in any area of practice, but I can only speak to adoption because that's all that I practice. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of motives that are the subtext, and people tend to hide behind confidentiality and the best interest of the child.
And let me, if you don't mind, Krista, I'm interrupting you, but if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Courtney a question as a spinoff of that. I know that recently, and I don't know if it's gone into effect or not, the legislature did increase the amount of compensation for appointed counsel on various cases, and that probably spans the gamut of criminal appointments in criminal court for criminal cases, juvenile cases, and even in our cases for adoption. But I do wonder if there has been any conversation about revisiting that. They got a little bump, but not enough to to really hugely make a difference, because we do run into these things where we're looking to appoint good guardian ad litems and good parent attorneys, and we don't have the attorneys there. They end up, basically giving their time to advocate for these children and the parents, because by the time a case goes from start to finish, and you talk about a trial, that $1,500 or whatever that cap is, I mean, that's expended quickly. They do discovery in these cases. Trials last for days, and they're having to interview witnesses and prepare their case. And so understanding that the legislature has had a recent eye on adoptions and I guess some focus on making them easier, making them get through the process a little bit better, and a desire for children to get transitioned out of foster care. Has there been any conversation about revisiting again that compensation to these appointed counsel in the cases?
The answer to your question is I don't totally know. Anything that costs money is hard, right? I mean, we're in a low service, low tax state. So the budget, even though we've been blessed in the last couple of years from the COVID relief funds from the federal government, and from the popularity of Nashville and the tourism dollars that have come in, budget amendments are challenging. But I'm sure that there is ongoing conversation by different advocacy groups or maybe within the department. I don't know totally if that's occurred. I know that issue of raising the fees for everyone that was compensated by the state was discussed a lot in the committees. And so Judge, I can follow back up and find that out for you. I mean, I'm sure there is some discussion going on, but again, there's a lot of really well needed and funded things at the legislature. We also, as an aside, represent the Child Advocacy Centers of Tennessee. And we're working on some issues with them for the victims' compensation funds from the federal government, for example, and trying to work with OCJP and DCS on those issues. So I can find out and follow back up with you. But one of the things that, and if I could pivot real quickly, because if I don't say things, I will forget them very quickly, is that Dawn is absolutely right. I mean, when you are starting the adoption, well, I can only speak for myself. And when I was starting the adoption process, my daughter's adoption cost more than I was making at the Tennessee Disability Coalition. And when you are, from my perspective, I was a young woman, younger than I am now. And I desperately wanted to be a mom. And so I kind of was blinded by the dollars, even though my husband and I had to mortgage our home and get money from our families to help pay for it. And my employer at the time was generous to help too. And so I was just obsessed about getting the means to the end. And I did not have a lot of, I had some cousins that were adopted, and my best childhood friend, his older sister had adopted, and that's how we went through that agency. her child. And so I had a kind of a small understanding of the process and the players and the people than I do now, for sure. But the money thing is a big deal. And you know, I don't fault anyone for making a living and making a fair wage on stuff, but to Dawn's point, in this moment of like really heightened anxiety and emotion, you just kind of like pay whatever, do whatever, and you're not paying attention to really what's going on, because the end result, at least for me, was the most, you know, that's all I could think about. Now, I do remember one of the bills that I think they are going to try to tackle, because this made me think of the facilitators, and I'm sure Dawn can speak to this more. But there are people that take it, speaking of the money thing, there is people take advantage of that. And there's these facilitators that were out of state, but doing business in Tennessee. And you'll have to remind me of all of this. And we're really gouging some prospective adoptive families that, you know, we'll help you facilitate an adoption. We'll help you find a birth mother. And they were kind of going unregulated. And so I think that is one of the issues that this other adoption group is going to try to tackle, as to how to put some parameters around that, which I think would be helpful. So, and then I'm going to say this too, and then we can go on, is that, you know, when you're going through the process as well, and again, I didn't have a lot of experience with this because I didn't have a lot of people in my life that had done this. You know, you don't really, you're so consumed with the end result, or I was, that it hit me like halfway through, like after my daughter was born, and I was fortunate enough to have had a relationship with her birth mother and be in the room and all the things, that I was like, oh, this isn't really about me. This is about the kid. But it took me literally till her birth to figure that out, because I was like, you know, I want to be a mom. I want to make sure I don't get screwed in this process. I want, you know, it's me, 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 me. And then all of a sudden I was like, well, hell, this had nothing to do with me. And I wish I'd had the foresight going into that. And I just didn't. And so one of the reasons I enjoy being discussions apart this and talking to prospective adoptive families is to try to reframe that. And I think Dawn kind of really hit on those issues, and Judge Williams as well. I mean, there's so many people involved in it, but really at the end of the day, it's about what's best for the child. That's it.
Judge Williams, I think that's a good place for you to talk about what is the best interest of the child standard, just generally, and then what are the ethical considerations that these other players need to make, the guardian ad litem, the attorneys for people like Courtney, the attorneys for the birth parents. What do they need to be doing to make sure they are upholding their ethical standards and obligations while zealously advocating for their clients? And how do you do that when so much of it is driven by money and emotion? And I think it's perfectly fine for it to be about you too. It's about the parent and the child, because, you know, we want the right thing for everybody. But at the end of the day, the analysis is the best interest of the child, right? So, Judge Williams?
Absolutely. Thank you. So Dawn and I were talking earlier today, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that sometimes people will file cases for termination of parental rights, and they'll list out certain grounds, but the grounds they list and that they pursue they're not able to meet the burden of clear and convincing evidence. But there are other grounds that the facts would have led themselves to allow the court to make that finding. And so I say that to say, I think one of the challenges that we see on the judicial side, or on the court side of things, is people will put a petition together and they haven't looked at the statute to see if it's in compliance with what the statute requires. They haven't crossed their T's and dotted their I's. And what they expect is to just put a whole bunch of stuff in a petition, put on a trial with a whole bunch of information, and then they want us to be the ones to take the time to go back and figure it out and clean it up for them. And I think there are some real ethical issues associated with that, because what that's saying to me is you don't really know what you're doing, or you don't care about what you're doing, and you're just hoping that the court's going to figure it out and do the right thing. And so people will miss the mark on grounds because they're so used to abandonment as a ground, or some of the more common grounds. And so they'll miss the mark on that. They will not have fully and truly evaluated their case in a way to make sure that the information that they're going to present to the court will align with what they have put in their petition, with the allegations that they've made. They won't have the right things in evidence or in the file to sustain what they're saying. And then they forget about best interest. And to your point, Kristen, best interest, we always have to find best interest. If there's anything I'll ever be known for saying, it's the court always has to find best interest. We always have to find best interest. And so even if we, feel good about a ground, we've got to look at what's in the best interest of a child. That best interest can be compromised by the process sometimes. Sometimes that's even intentional. So sometimes, let's say, the department, well, I'm not going to say the department in general, but let's just say petitioners. Sometimes petitioners understand that it may be to their advantage for the child to remain in the placement of the prospective adoptive parent as long as possible to help them, and some of the factors that the court's going to look at in best interest when we're looking at that, if a ground is met. Well, and so what they'll do is they won't move the case along the way they need to, or they'll hold the case up, or they'll wait to bring certain issues up to delay it even longer so that they can come into court and say, well, this child's been in the care of the adoptive parents for 5 years, 6 years, 3 years. So, now this child doesn't even know who their other parent is, or has very little relationship. Well, that's really not working in the best interest of that child while you are preparing your case and moving your case through the system. If you're sitting back intentionally allowing that child to be in this circumstance, because the court very well could find that termination is not in the best interest. And now here we have a child that we're going to have to figure out about some reunification things on, or some transitional things as it relates to getting back involved in the life of their birth parent or both birth parents. And so those cause grave concerns for the children. To answer your question, Kristen, you asked about best interest. And so, the court's really going to look at, from a big picture perspective, the factors that are laid out by the statute, which are not exhaustive, and they're just kind of more of a guideline for what the court to consider. Every case will be different in terms of what the best interest what the court may lean on more or less for us in terms of best interest, based on the facts of the case. Ultimately, the court is going to be concerned with, what does it look like if we do not terminate rights and the birth parent is either reintroduced into this child's life, or there's that potential of that child going back into the home of the birth parent? What is that going to really look like? How is that going to impact the child? And so that's going to be a huge one. Also, I think family connections are big. How much does a child know about their biological family? What do they believe to know? When have they even been told if they're old enough? There are situations where some children have never been told they have another parent, even though a birth parent, that they have believed that a step parent has been their birth parent for all their life, and they're older and old enough to understand the difference. And so, all these things present challenges to the court, but they're all factors that we have to consider for sure. Hopefully I answered your question.
You did on the best interest issue. The other thing that I touched on was, what are the ethical considerations of the various players? But I think, Dawn, that's a good punt to you, if you're willing to talk about some of the things that you've seen, that, I don't want to say people toe the line, but I think that they're sometimes can be pushing their what it is that they're focused on, or what their agenda may be, so that they're walking a fine line, if you will. And I wanted to see if you yourself have maybe, I know you would never do that, but if you've experienced that with others, and if you could speak to that a little bit. And maybe you haven't. I mean, maybe nobody's doing that. But
oh no, that's definitely happening. But are you thinking of people who get wrapped up in their own perspective in the form of lawyers or litigants, or both?
Um, all of the above, really.
Okay.
Sometimes I think
Okay.
people can't get out of their own way for the best interest of the children. Sometimes I think attorneys are zealously advocating the emotional and monetary expense when they represent adoptive parents, which is, great, but we have to do that inside our ethical bounds. So I think you could talk a little bit about that from everyone's perspective.
Sure. A couple of things. There's a lot of big trends. There are not a lot of newborns available domestically to adopt right now, and there are not a lot of adoptive parents seeking them out. So most of us who do adoption law have seen over the last 20 years a shift from a lot of newborn adoption to more DCS and interfamily and sort of post-opiate addiction adoption, where the family's trying to make another plan. And those kind of cases where the child has been in the home for some period of time and they love them, and where the birth parent has some shortcomings, either DCS is removed or the family has stepped in because the parent struggles with addiction. You want to talk about some righteous indignation. How can they be calling me for a deposition at 8 o'clock in the morning and I'm here and they're not? And I was up with their baby all night last night, vomiting on me. I mean, I have definitely heard that. And when you only are looking out of the eyes of one person, that makes perfect sense. And even when you step back from a more objective standpoint, you got to say there's a lot of logic there. But there's also, if you've heard any of the seminars educating us about addicts, then we know a little bit more. And if you listen to adult adopted people about preserving their connection, maybe not legal, but at least emotional, with their birth heritage and family, then that's a little different perspective as well. So, and then when we were talking about, so those are the litigants, and they, I have clients who will tell me, if I don't get this baby, here's all the horrible things that are going to befall him or her. And sometimes I agree completely, but I usually would say it with less certainty than they do. And sometimes I don't agree. Sometimes I think, I think this is what this child needs. If it wasn't, I wouldn't take the case. And I think the adoption bar, the folks that do this all the time, most of us won't take a case if we don't think what we're advocating for is in the best interest of the child. I don't, and I don't think Lisa and Jennifer, who are on this call, would either. But so you end up those cases tend to go to people who are a little bit less experienced, which maybe that's a good thing. But anyway, the lawyers, like I'll tell you a story. My baby sister has given, and my parents have given me permission to talk a little bit about the fact that I spent the first 10 years of, not the first, the middle 10 years of my childhood with my parents litigating against my aunt to get my little sister, who'd lived with us since she was 4. And she was ultimately adopted by us. And, my dad is a Carson Newman professor. For those of you who don't know, that's Baptist College. And my parents both met there, and they are kind of, particularly back then, kind of Ozzie and Harriet, kind of churchy, didn't say bad words in front of us, didn't have beer in the house, And in the midst of this litigation, my aunt's attorney, who's a good attorney, he was so zealously furious with my mother, who is just like a sweet little elementary school teacher, that walking out of the courtroom, he looked at her and called her a string of 4-letter words. And this is the attorney to my sweet little mom, who's taking care of her niece while my aunt has dual diagnosis, addiction, schizophrenia. So the lawyers need to be aware that we can get emotionally way too enmeshed with our client's point of view if we don't bring objectivity then we're not doing our clients a service. We're missing opportunities to settle. We're missing opportunities to look out for what that child needs. We're miss it. Evaluating a case is a very analytical thing. I think Judge Williams alluded to, you've got to choose the right grounds. You've got to present the right proof. It's like putting together just a whole spreadsheet of how does everything fit together and how do you get all the boxes with something weighty in them to prove each element of each ground and all the, the weight of the best interest. And you got to be in your head. You can't be in your emotions. And so one of the things that I see is lawyers will take cases that they're not experienced enough to take or not willing to learn. And let me just stop and do a plug. There is no area of Tennessee law where what you need to know is outlined as clearly and presented as often as adoption law, because there's the Tennessee Bar Association adoption section. We mentor each other. We talk to each other. We're the most active section of the bar. There's my law book. There's my seminars. There's lots of other seminars. I mean, if you want to be good at this law, there's no excuse to file some of this stuff that our judges tell us that they're seeing. You go in some other area of law, they don't spoon feed you quite as well as we do in this field. So anyway, you get people who don't want to work. You get people who want to be on the Jerry Springer show style. They want to get all wrapped up in something dramatic and then you get people who understand that litigation is rare and they want to litigate. And these are some of the cases that still get litigated. They're getting litigated because the birth parents get free lawyers. They're getting litigated because once you love a child, you will mortgage your house. And so it's attracting some people who want to litigate but don't know what they're doing. And that's not ethical at all. And then because I'm kind of like a old school kind of lawyer, I think a big part of our job is client counseling. And if I have a client that's talking to me about filing a big, hairy lawsuit, first, I'm going to be talking to them probably more than I do my husband during the period of their lawsuit. And we're going to be like family. And if I don't like them, I won't take it, because I don't want to spend that much time with them. But I want them to know, it'll be a fishing expedition into your fitness as well. You'll be deposed. You'll be stressed out all the time. I'll call you all the time. You're going to have to read pleadings on short notice and sign them and turn them around. Your case is going to get continued and you're going to get all geared up and excited, and then somebody's going to get COVID or the guardian ad litem is going to make some crazy decision in a flippant way, and you're going to have to deal with that consequence. Or I might want you to see some family therapy to document some piece of our case. If they don't know that before they file, how can they make a good faith informed decision to file? And also, how much is it going to cost? And how can they influence how much it's going to cost? So that counseling piece is a place where I think a lot of lawyers are falling down. When I have lawyers call me and clients of other lawyers call me in the middle of litigation and want a second opinion, one of the first things they always say was, I had no idea it was going to be like this. And I'm listening going, well, your lawyer did, I hope. I mean, that sounds like a pretty normal case to me. So I would say an ethics point that's important to make is we should counsel our clients.
Courtney, we didn't pre-cook this, and so if I'm asking you something you're uncomfortable answering, tell me that. But I think that Dawn is raising a good point about being prepared going into an adoption and how we as lawyers can prepare clients. And so I'm wondering if you, I guess I have to be careful because I don't know who represented you, and they may be on this call. But I just want to know if you how your experience plays into any of the things we've talked about, whether it's you yourself being prepared or things you witnessed during the process or things you wish had been different that you might be willing to speak to from a personal
Sure. For those of you, there's several people I know on this Zoom, and y'all know I'm an open book, so I'm happy to talk about it. And I think one of the things I want to start with that I think I didn't fully appreciate until I was well into being a mother. And, the thing is, once you're, so obsessed becoming a mom, and then once I became a mom, it was kind of like the adoption was, out of my mind, right? Because then I was like, oh, wow, what did I decide to do? Because this is really hard. But at the root of adoption is tragedy, right? I mean, it's tragic that a woman doesn't have the physical ability to have a baby, or it's tragic that a birth mother doesn't have the supports in her life to parent the child. And I think I was so like that felt like I was being too negative about my own personal experiences. So I never wanted to actually acknowledge that. And it wasn't until, my daughter was born in 2008. So the internet was kind of a thing. And now it's like this huge thing, but you see all these things on Instagram about, and now it's probably going to show me nothing but adoption reels here in a minute, but it's these children that are now, they're adopted kids, and now they're older, and they're talking about the sorrow they feel about, I mean, even though they're grateful that their parents adopted them, there is this layer of tragedy. And I think if I had known that a little bit better and someone had counseled me into that, I don't think I would have been so white knuckling of my experience. So, I mean, and I had gone through an agency in Arkansas that's no longer in existence. And the attorney was not totally forthright with me about some stuff. Like, we get to, and I've gotten permission from my family to share this because they know I share everything anyway. But she was born in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and we had gotten there, and I knew that my daughter's birth mother had some challenges, and I was a disability advocate, so I wasn't, poverty and life experiences like that didn't scare me because I had been advocating that in my professional life. But I don't think I was totally prepared for the poverty and life experiences that Lizzie's birth mother was experiencing. And I think that was jarring for me because I didn't know, no one had kind of counseled me about how to connect with somebody who does have large life experience differences, right? And so, and then, I'm y'all probably getting this vibe, but I talk a lot. And so I was like aggressively talking to my Lizzie's birth mother, trying to get her to like me because no one was there to help us. There was no social worker. It was just my husband and I and my daughter's birth mother trying to figure out this really complicated, huge life experience for both of us. And no one was there to kind of be like, this is going to be a little weird for you, and it's going to be really weird for her. And I will tell you all the funniest story. And so I was so nervous. Like, I'm like, I got to get her to like me, because what if she doesn't like me? She's not going to give me this baby, and all I want is this baby, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So the very first thing I say to this woman, oh my Lord, is I had this vision driving down there that what if she was like really unattractive, which I know is really terrible for me to admit outside, but I was just like, you have these thoughts of what your baby would look like if, you had it with your husband. And I was just out of my mind, honestly. So the very first thing I say to my daughter's birth mother is not like, hi, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so grateful for this experience. Like, do you like ketchup with your fries? The first thing I say to this woman blurts out of my mouth is, you're so attractive. I'm so glad. Like, 'cause I was so nervous. And I was like, and my husband's like, well, we've lost this adoption. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I said that out loud. And she goes, well, I'm glad that you're attractive too. I'm like, well, now that we got that out in the open. But all that being said is I did not have anybody to coach me, like what it was going to be like in this moment that's shrouded with tragedy, right? But also in a very loving way, because we both, again, I didn't realize it wasn't about me till it wasn't about me, but realized that she had Lizzie's best interest in mind and wanted to help facilitate. It's almost like she was wanting to help me too, which was a really beautiful thing. Like, she felt sorry for me because I couldn't have kids. And then I felt sorry for her because she was having to go through this thing. And so it was just like this interesting moment. And so, but I think what could have helped, I think if there had been some acknowledgement that these situations are really challenging and sticky, because there's all sorts of emotion wrapped up in it. If someone had walked me through that, and I think if someone had been there with me, I might not have fumbled it so terribly. But I think that as y'all as professionals that are in the space or know somebody that's going through it, I think kind of laying out, and I know that Dawn and Lisa and Jennifer do that, and I'm certain Judge Williams does, kind of tells people what to experience. But I think if you can coach them along that way, that would have been really beneficial for me. And then, there was, and I would, want to, go back to the attorneys that know this more about, client confidentiality, but because the attorney and the adoption agency at the time did not kind of tell me the backstory to Lizzie's birth mother, we had a situation right after she was born where she had some health issues and we had to get life flighted to Little Rock. And when that was happening, Lizzie's birth mother got nervous, and there was a moment where she was, quote unquote, changing her mind. And of course, the anxiety just ramped up with everybody. And then I found out some things about her life that I didn't know, but they told me in this like kind of crisis moment that I think I would have appreciated knowing on the front end. But then again, I don't know the ethical guidelines of I can't remember if the attorney was representing the birth mother or me, or I think maybe both. But anyway, I think sometimes being as upfront as possible is in everybody's best interest. And I understand kind of the stickiness of that too, but I think that would have probably been a little helpful. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and Courtney, I want to expand on something that you said. I recently was reading some stuff that led me to the term adoption trauma, which you're talking about, where sometimes the adoptees, we don't really go back and look at the impact it's had on them. And once they're at a place or stage to process this, how they begin to think about, well, why didn't my birth parent keep me, or what was wrong with me, or what was it, and it becomes something that really they need support on as well. We always look at it as happy day and somebody's getting adopted, but down the line, I was reading an article where some adoptees, were had some input about how over the years, it became a different kind of situation for them at some point. So that's something we don't really talk about. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of the players and some ethical considerations is guardian ad litems, in that they, oftentimes we may see them align with one side or the other, which I think can be a very slippery slope, because their job really isn't to advocate or support the adoptive, the prospective adoptive parent or the birth parent, as much as it is the best interest of the child. And rarely do I see a guardian ad litem take a position where they're kind of like, it may differ from both of the parties, or maybe a combination of the two. It always, more than I think it should, it looks and feels like there is an alignment. And so I think that can be a slippery slope in those cases as well. They really should make sure that they maintain an appearance of being independent, even if what they're supporting may align with one or the other. But sometimes it looks like they're just kind of working together. I think can be something to watch out for too.
Agreed.
So I don't know exactly what time I need to be wrapping this up. We've got about 5 minutes, and there was one other little piece that I was hoping that maybe you, Judge Williams, and Dawn could speak to, and it piggybacks a little bit on what Courtney was saying about being so emotionally driven, and there's backstory you don't know about, and there are good facts and bad facts and things that have happened. And when you're actually in a termination proceeding, all of that is being laid on the line. And actually, Lisa Tomlinson just posted something in the chat that is also interesting about telling her clients, her adoption clients, that a TPR is equivalent to a death penalty case in Tennessee, and asking them if they're ready for that. Because you do have to go in there and say a lot of sometimes bad things, or however you want to characterize it, about the birth parent to the child or children to be adopted. And then sometimes you as the prospective adoptive parent maybe haven't done everything the way that you should have. And sometimes maybe the agencies haven't done everything that they should have. And so I wondered if in this little bit of time, just a couple minutes, y'all could speak to embracing those good and bad facts in that context, so that lawyers can put on their most credible winning case, I know that's a really long question for the short minutes we have, but maybe just speaking to the good and the bad facts and putting everything out there to let the court have the whole story. Does that make sense?
That goes back to one thing that Dawn pointed out is that these cases are appealed a lot, termination of parental rights cases. And so what can be concerning is when people don't put all the information out there that they should, or they're hiding things. And then on an appeal, it becomes, it comes to light a little bit more. Somebody raises that as a bigger issue and things of that nature. Whereas if you had just told me in the trial, right, then I can deal with that fact. You still may be in a very good position for your case. But I can include the fact that the court heard that, considered it, thought about it, and here's how the court kind of lands with that. And in the big picture of things, these are the things that matter the most. And so that is always disturbing in general when people are not as forthcoming as they should be, in particular in something that is so sensitive to determination of a parental right, which we know is a fundamental right under our U.S. Constitution. And so the more information, the better. Bad facts can be good in that they can be considered, they can be part of the record, and the court can say, I considered this too, and I'm still finding this. And it can help the process move along, I think, a lot quicker when people are forthcoming and put that on the table. So that's my 2 cents worth in a quick.
I would agree completely that you want to absolutely tell the truth. Some of the most credible things, I had one dad who he was adopting with his second wife, and he had made some parenting mistakes in his first marriage. And that came out in the trial, and he was my best witness on that. He just said, it's a lot easier to parent with a woman who wants to parent with you. And I'm a lot better parent this time. And I'm older. And, he just took it by the horns and said, here's the difference. And the same guy, his first wife was helping the birth parent. So he'd gone to a strip club, and he said, yeah, I did during my first marriage. I went to the strip club. A lot of men do that. I don't really do that anymore. I'm kind of age past that, but yeah, it happened. And I think all that just really bolstered his credibility. Like, he was a real guy. That and him speaking with his heart about how much he loved this child, and in great detail, the ways that he spent time with the child and his vision for parenting the child going forward. One of the things when I'm training lawyers on trying these cases that I think is really important is you need a theory of the case. Lawyers don't want to terminate judges don't want to terminate parental rights if they don't have to. And you have to prove grounds in best interest, but you also have to explain to them why there's no other way to do this, why we're at this place, how we got to this place, and how we're not going to get anywhere. It's not going to be redeemed. And for me, I always just try to figure out what really happened, because there is no more credible theory of a case than the truth. So what I mean, for example, is birth mom has a dependent personality type and has always partners with strong, violent men at the expense of protecting her children. That is her personality type. She has a low IQ. She's not responding to therapy, and therefore it is not likely to change. Or she has a narcissistic personality disorder, or he does, whichever parent cannot put somebody else first. This is a 3-year-old special needs child. The parents got to be able to put somebody else first. If I can lay that out, set it up in my opening, put the proof in, and come back to it briefly at my closing, the judge goes, oh, I see why this is really my only option. So you've got to answer the legal question and the emotional question. How did we get here, and why is this essential? And in both cases, I think the truth is what you use. But you got to figure out what it is. And that takes a little discovery and reflection. Sometimes I'm I've already filed by the time I really figure out what's going on.
So I want to thank all of you. Courtney's left us. She had to run out, but Dawn, thank you. Judge Williams, thank you. Everyone for being on the panel today and sharing and educating. Joyce, I don't know if somebody's going to take over and kick me out as moderator or how this is going to work.
No,
But I do.
Kristen. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I think you can close us out, Kristen.
Okay. Well, I was sort of on that on that path anyway, but thank you to our speakers. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you to Courtney for sharing her story. I have certainly gotten a lot of it today, and I look forward to seeing you all in adoption court.
Bye.